Hello there, my name is Tracy and I work for Natural Horse New Zealand. I'm on my tea break this morning, just having a quick cuppa, so I thought I would talk to you while I was here about mycotoxins. Now, mycotoxins are a problem for horses here in New Zealand. We see a lot of horses who are having severe behavioural and physical symptoms created by mycotoxins, and I also see a huge amount of confusion about how mycotoxins can affect your horse. So I thought I would just do my best to try and educate you on why mycotoxins are a problem. So let's talk about mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are an onboard fungus, or sometimes just called a toxin, which is an alpha toxin, another type of toxin, that's contained within plants. It's not just grasses, it's plants, okay? So anything in your pasture does have the propensity to cause problems for your horse. What happens with mycotoxins is the grass, I'm going to just show you, this works pretty well. Imagine if you are a single little strand of grass living in a paddock, okay? And how would you protect yourself from being stood on or eaten? You can't run away, okay? So what this grass has done over 55 million years of evolution is very cleverly, very sophisticatedly, it's come up with a way to make you feel like shit so you won't eat it. It's as simple as that. So that you will go on and choose another plant to eat. This is called mycotoxicosis. It's chemical warfare. Nettles, they're a perfect example of chemical warfare within plants. So they sting you, they leave a lasting memory about being stung, and you avoid nettles in future. And that's pretty much how mycotoxins work. The horse, or a cow, or a sheep, or a rabbit, or even a bug or a weevil, they eat that plant, it makes them feel like crap, so they try and avoid that particular plant in future, and that's how it works. That's why we have mycotoxins. So it's absolute nonsense to believe that mycotoxins are only in one strand of grass and that are one type of grass, which is commonly believed within the New Zealand equine industry is ryegrass, because that's just simply not true. There's 300 known toxins in our pastures, and as the years go on, we'll probably find another 300 more and another 300 more, because toxins are the plant's way of defending themselves. They're not a parasite, aren't mycotoxins. So you've got the grass on its own, living on its own. And then you've got the mycotoxin that lives within the grass. And it's all over the grass. It's not just in the seed head. So that's another myth, okay? It's not just in the sheath or the root. It's throughout the plant, okay? What does the mycotoxin get out of living in a piece of grass? Well, it gets fed. Okay, it eats some of that sap, some of that sugar from the grass. The grass sacrifices that because the mycotoxin protects the grass. It's not just grass either, it's plants, okay? So that's how mycotoxins work. When your horse is affected by a mycotoxin, he can feel very ill indeed. He's got symptoms such as stumbling, tripping, sore body, inability to feel, as in the touch on his skin tends to make them very girthy. They can buck, especially when you put a saddle on or you sit or you go into the canter, the saddle's incredibly sore on the horse's body. They can shy and overreact, become anxious, even panic, buck you off, run you over. They're not themselves. They behave completely out of character when they're suffering with the problems of mycotoxins. So how do we manage mycotoxins? Well, the first thing I need to talk about is mycotoxins are not just in pasture. They are also in your hay, because the hay, it's H-A-Y, because I've got a Yorkshire accent, everyone says I don't say it right. Sounds all right in my head. But hay has got as many toxins in it when it's been cut and dried as it was when it was growing pasture. So I work with a lot of people who believe that they don't need a toxin binder for their horse because he's only on hay. Wrong. They're definitely wrong. That is not the case. There's as much mycotoxins in that hay, in the chaff, in the grass, and also in some of your pelleted feeds, if your feeds have been made, for example, with grain. So the grain is part of the plant. There's nothing to stop the grain being loaded with mycotoxins. So it's very rare for a horse not to have mycotoxins in their body. But the deal is what level, okay? Mycotoxins are measured in parts per million, and small parts per million will have small reactions. Large parts per million will have problematic and dangerous reactions. So it's really a case of how do you manage and how do you prevent the absorption of mycotoxins. So now let's talk about why mycotoxins create all those symptoms. The horse's body, like yours, is run on electrical energy. Those electrical signals go throughout the nervous system. And I want you to imagine the nervous system's a little bit like the wiring on your car, okay? Now, if you can equate your sense of feel, touch, sight, smell, your hearing, okay, to the windscreen wipers and the doors and the windows and the indicators and the stoplights on your car, now imagine them all just coming on at once for no reason. Okay, you've got windscreen wipers going like crazy, you've got windows going up and down, you've got the doors opening, you've got the boot opening up and down, you've got the lights flashing. That's the equivalent of what it's like when your horse is loaded up on mycotoxins. So, because the horse is a prey animal, when any of those signals don't work like they're meant to, in other words, let's say distorted vision. Distorted vision is one of the largest symptoms of mycotoxicosis, which is the effects of mycotoxins. And the reason that the horse has such a problem with distorted vision is because the eye is the largest nerve in the horse's body. And he is essentially needed to be able to sight any threat from miles away, okay? He already has a pretty crap depth perception, so when he looks down, say at a puddle, he finds it hard to judge. But when he's suffering from mycotoxicosis, he finds it almost impossible to judge. And the distance the ground comes up to see him or goes away from him, the distance vision is off. Things jump out at him and blur and swerve, and you can see why quite quickly he would start to panic in those situations. He's like, what's that? Ooh, where's this come from? Oh my God, look at that. So that's putting him in a state of anxious flight mode, which is why your horses knock themselves. I've seen the most beautiful natured horses turn into absolute nightmare basket cases because of mycotoxins. And that's why I'm doing this talk tip for you, because I don't want you to have to go through that. I had a really horrible situation a few years ago, about 15 years ago now. I'd gone into a chemist for a prescription locally where I live. A young girl had come over to ask me about a horse, because hey, you're that horse whisperer woman. Okay, I get that quite a lot. And she was lovely. And she was saying that she had this thoroughbred and she was really cruisy natured. She could ride her bareback in a halter. She was so laid back. But recently, the horse had become really reactive. So I said to her, it's probably mycotoxins at this time of year. So I'd recommend that you go get a toxin binder. A couple of weeks later, I go back into the chemist, excuse me, and this young girl comes over to me and tells me that this horse has killed her sister a week ago. The horse had flipped over backwards, overreacted to something in the environment, and the sister had been tragically killed. She was only 22 years old, was the sister. It was just horrific. What a horrible nightmare situation to happen for anybody. The lady didn't want the horse to be put to sleep. She loved the horse dearly, but the parents were understandably distraught. I had to make a statement to the police to try and get them to understand how the horse had reacted. And as part of the process, I ended up taking the horse. She was called Ali, and she was an absolute sweetheart, and I loved that horse to pieces. We rehomed her to a lovely lady called Becky, and she had a lovely life. But Ali was incredibly toxic. We did some detailed studies on Ali. We wanted to know what had gone on. We took some tissue samples and we sent them away to America for analysis. And it came back that poor Ali was absolutely riddled with mycotoxins. It had really built up high in her system, and she'd had an overreaction due to that. So this tragic accident had happened because Ali was suffering from the effects of mycotoxicosis. I ended up doing a coronary report for the inquest into the death of this lady. And after that, I decided I was telling everybody. I wasn't being quiet anymore. You see, I'd made a toxin binder of my own, a plant-based toxin binder that I was using on my own herd. I had no intention of selling it, but I just wanted it for my own horses and for the horses that I was working with that was coming through the rescue side of things that I was giving my time to. And I was very fortunate that I had this herd of guinea pigs, if you like. I mean, I wasn't hurting them or experimenting with them, but I was testing the products and seeing how it was working. And I tested hundreds of products with this ever-changing herd of toxic horses, and the results were mind-boggling. Some of these products were just ridiculous. They didn't work at all. They didn't have products or ingredients in them that would work. I just want to say, while I've got you here now, that magnesium doesn't do jack shit for horses who have got mycotoxicosis. It doesn't do a thing. I went to Massey University and asked for their body of work on mycotoxins and was very disappointed that they didn't have any. This was in 2005. So that's what we're up against. You know, we're up against a whole scientific community that doesn't take the effects of mycotoxicosis seriously. And due to that, that doesn't funnel through to the vets. So your vets don't take it seriously. Well, I've been involved with several cases where people have been seriously injured and died, okay? So I would advise that everybody takes this very seriously. I'm sorry to get so heavy on you, but I don't want to see another tragedy happen unnecessarily because of a toxic horse and people misinformation regarding that toxic horse. So let's talk about toxins. Mycotoxins build up in the horse's system and they cause these worrying symptoms as well as these behavioural problems. But they're really easy to fix. So easy. All you need to do is get yourself a good working toxin binder. Now that toxin binder will cloak the toxin that the horse is eating. So in other words, imagine putting that mycotoxin inside a little glass marble and then putting it through the horse's digestive system. Because it's cloaked, it can't absorb into the stomach lining. Now, toxin binders have all got a limit. This is how I explain the limit. Imagine that you've got a paper towel. The whole point of that paper towel is to mop up a little bit of water. So let's say you put your cup down and it leaves a little ring at the bottom. You get your paper towel and you mop it up and it does its job. Now imagine getting that same paper towel and putting it in a bath full of water. Has it got a hope in hell's chance of being able to mop up that entire bath of water? It hasn't, has it? And that's what a mycotoxin binder would do if your horse is on a full-time green grass pasture. So if you have a grass management plan where your horse is restricted with grass, so he's not just eating full mycotoxin-laden pasture all day long, your toxin binder will work lovely, work great. It'll mop up those toxins. You'll have a really happy, healthy horse. But if your horse is out full-time on a full green grass spring or summer pasture where those mycotoxins are growing like crazy, that mycotoxin binder will have to work its guts out, and there's not enough mycotoxin binder that you could give that horse. So it's a case of using a good toxin binder and a grass management plan. Also understand that mycotoxins are present in hay and chaff and even some pelleted feeds. Like anything that contains grains or grain byproducts are grass heads, seed heads off grasses that include mycotoxins. The other problem that we've got here in New Zealand is we've got amplified farming grasses. And that's why people believe that it's only ryegrass that causes a problem. Ryegrass definitely does cause a problem, but it's not the only one. Why do you think ryegrass causes such a problem? That's because the agricultural industry a few years ago decided that they would crossbreed grasses that had high levels of mycotoxins with other grasses that also had high levels of mycotoxins. Now, mycotoxins are normally species appropriate. In other words, if there's a particular type of grass that is heavily grazed on by, say, weevils, the mycotoxin will be designed to cause a problem, make the weevil feel ill. Yeah? It's only a very small amount of mycotoxins in that because it's only a small animal. So that weevil mycotoxin, or weevil targeted mycotoxin, is not really going to cause a problem for a human being or a horse. Not unless we have buckets of the stuff anyway. But when we crossbreed grasses and we make those mycotoxins stronger and stronger and stronger for the agricultural industry so that the grass that cows and sheep are grazing don't get damaged by weevils, then we make what we call super mycotoxins. In other words, mycotoxins on steroids. And they're heavy enough and potent and strong enough that they'll kill a horse. They'll shut down his liver, damage his kidneys, affect his entire organs, and they will kill him. So just be very mindful of that, people, okay? It's not just the message is there's mycotoxins everywhere, because there definitely is, but some grasses are a lot worse than others. And the biggest culprit is perennial ryegrass. And I see these adverts on TV and it drives me insane about these heavy striped grasses and whatnot. So they're still making endophyte loaded grasses. Endophyte is just another word for mycotoxin, by the way. There's a lot of different names for toxins. So I hope that's given you a large understanding of mycotoxins so that it prevents your horse from ever having to go through some of those horrible things that some of the horses that I work with suffer with. Mycotoxicosis is a very easy thing to fix. If you've got a horse that's toxic, what I would recommend is get our product called EquiProtect. It's a great product. It's plant-based. It works really well. It's really strong, highly potent. Okay, you take a tablespoon of that morning and night, and you feed that to your horse for 5 days, and that will reset his system, mop all the current mycotoxins up out of his system. And then on day 6, you can go down to 1 dose a day. After you've used it for a couple of weeks, and your horse is completely recovered from the effects of mycotoxicosis, as well as being protected from any more build-up, then you can use our product called All-in-One, which is a multi-mineral, vitamin, amino acid, joint formula, prebiotic, probiotic, and a mycotoxin binder built in. So I hope that helps you. I'm not trying to sell you my product. I don't care whether you buy my product or not, but I do care that you are well educated on what mycotoxins are and what they can do and the problems that they cause. Anyway, I'm signing off. If you want to know more, head on to our website, www.naturalhorse.co.nz. I better get back to work. Take care. Bye-bye.